was this fundamental machloket between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about when we make a gzera of shogeg atu mezid, right? Our Mishnah, which is how we got into all this, talked about this concept of hezek she'eino nikar, right? You damage something, but no one knows you damaged it. So, for example, if you make something tameh, right? So if you make fruit tameh, there's no apparent difference in the food, but obviously it can't be used in settings that you can't use something that's tameh. So it has a huge impact. So we talked about a knas that we make if you do that, but the knas was if you do it b'mezid. The question was, what if you do it b'shogeg? What if you do it by mistake? So we had a machlok at Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda about whether we extend that knas to something that happens b'shogeg. And one opinion, Rabbi Meir's opinion, was that we only do that when it's a deoraita. I'm sorry, Meir said the opposite. We don't do it when it's a deoraita. We only do it when it's a drabanan. Because if the prohibition is only drabanan, we're worried people are going to be lax about it, and they're going to not care so much. So therefore, if they did it on purpose, we would make a prohibition on using the thing, on getting benefit from it, being over the Isser Doraita, even drabanan, sorry. And if they do it b'shogeg, we would extend the same takana, so that if you do it by mistake, you still can't use it. By a doraita, we don't need to make that sort of extra level, and therefore it would only be if you did it b'mezid, not if you did it b'shogeg. And Rabbi Yehuda said the opposite, that in a thing that's deoraita, we want to be stricter, right? And so therefore, we make a knas even on what's shogeg, so that if you did something deoraita, like you made something tameh, then we would make an isser even if you did it b'shogeg. But by drabanan, we don't extend the isser to shogeg. We only make an isser if you do it on purpose. And so we had the case yesterday of shvi'it, right? Now, shvi'it, as you recall, is of course an isser doraita, right? Yeah. And we talked about someone who planted during shvi'it, right? So the Braita, actually the Tanya, which is still on Daf Nun Gimel, talked about someone who planted on Shabbat, if you recall, right, which is definitely an isser doraita, right? To plant on Shabbat. And we said that, you plant your tree, you forget it's Shabbat, right? You do it b'shogeg. 5 years later, you come around, you realize, oh my gosh, you put a post on it. I planted this on May 10th. Someone does the math and realizes that your calendar was all messed up and it was Shabbat. So what do? You have to get rid of the tree. So the Braita said, b'shogeg, you don't have to. B'mezid, you have to, right? And then on Shvi'it, Rabbi Meir said, it doesn't matter either way, you have to get rid of the tree. Of course. And that was Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda disagreed and said, on Shvi'it, you can keep it if it's b'shogeg, but not if it's on mezid, on Shabbat, ben b'shogeg, ben b'mezid, ya'aker. So we questioned that whole idea. Says the Gemara, the Gemara's first answer yesterday was that, you need to make a gzera on Shvi'it because people will realize that you did it. But by Shabbat, no one knows I planted this fruit tree on Shabbat, right? I mean, you don't count the days or the weeks of when you counted a tree. Davar acher, says the Gemara, one other explanation for why we would care about Shvi'it, and not care as much about Shabbat, to aser it if it was b'shogeg, is because top line of Daf Nun Daled Amud Aleph, nechshedu Yisrael al Shvi'it v'nechshedu al Shabbatot. People are not so careful. We suspect that people cheat when it comes to Shemitah, and we don't suspect that people cheat when it comes to Shabbat. People take Shabbat much more seriously than Shemitah. This is certainly true today, right? Now, says Gemara, my davar acher, why do you need a second explanation? Hachi kamar. This is what the Gemara, the Braita, is trying to explain. The Chitei, remember, the first answer was that Shabbat is not such a big deal because nobody counts to Shabbat, meaning you'll never recognize, oh, this person planted a tree on Shabbat, they're eating the peaches, maybe you're allowed to eat peaches that grew on Shabbat, that you planted on Shabbat, right? Because usually you don't count and say, oh, I planted this tree 30, 40 days ago. The Chitei Shabbat nami. No, Shabbat also, sometimes you will recognize that you actually planted on Shabbat. Because zimnin denikni le yom shloshim b'Shabbat. Remember that although usually what day you plant doesn't matter, the year you plant matters. But remember that Shemitah, you're not allowed to plant during Shemitah, right? Which starts on Rosh Hashanah. The halacha is that extends 30 days before Shemitah. Meaning if you plant within 30 days of Shemitah, because it didn't really take root for 30 days, it's as if you planted during Shemitah, and it counts as all the prohibitions of Shemitah. Shloshim yom before Shemitah. Let's say this year turns out, so everyone, as you can imagine, there was a huge rush at Home Depot to get your plants and to plant them 31 days before Shemitah, right? Everyone who waits to the last second is like eating before the fast, right? You're rushing to do it. So let's say that year, the 30th day before Shemitah turned out to be Shabbat, right? And so everyone recognizes, look, everyone looks around the neighborhood, who planted and who didn't plant. And they look at your yard and say, you didn't plant, right? Of course, you forgot that the 30th day was Shabbat. You were like, woke up Saturday morning, was like, this is great. My last day, it's perfect weather. You planted the whole garden, right? So then it might be clear to the neighbors that in fact you did plant on Shabbat, because even though they can't tell which day you planted, they know you didn't plant up to that time. And then during Shemitah, 2 years later, you're eating the fruit. Let's say they say, oh, he must have planted on Shabbat. Okay, you did it b'shogeg, but it implies that you can eat what you did b'shogeg, and therefore we might be concerned. So read that inside, 4 lines from the top. Shabbat nami might be recognizable to people that you planted on Shabbat. Zimnin, the mikla yom shloshim b'Shabbat, the 30th day before Shemitah, for Rosh Hashanah, comes out on Shabbat, and inata hu yuma hu desakale shata. If you plant that day, it counts like you did it a year before Shemitah. Right? The low, but if you don't plant that day, meaning you go up to within 30 days, lo salkale shata, that year doesn't count. So therefore, because of that sort of concern that Shabbat also would be nikar and be a problem, therefore we have a second reason, tashma, therefore we come and learn davar acher, another explanation, which is nechshadu Yisrael al shvi'it, lo nechshadu al Shabbat, that we worry, Rabbi Meir worries about shvi'it more than Shabbat because people are lax about shvi'it. And therefore, we make a gzera shogeg atu mezed, where we don't make a gzera shogeg atu mezed when it comes to Shabbat. So if you plant on Shabbat on purpose, of course, you can't use it. But if you plant on Shabbat by mistake, Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to use it. There's more, well, that's Rabbi Meir. But Rabbi Yehuda Lokasha, isn't it a question about Rabbi Yehuda? Because Rabbi Yehuda said the opposite, right? He said that if you do something on Doraita, shogeg, you're not allowed to do it. And here we say about Rabbi Yehuda said that on Shabbat, you can't use it if it's b'shogeg, but on Shvi'it you can. How could you use it on Shvi'it if it was b'shogeg? If he holds it, your kones a shogeg atu mezed. Says we're lo kasha. That's not a question either, because the atre de Rabbi Yehuda chamir le Shvi'it. In Rabbi Yehuda's neighborhood, Shvi'it was very, very strict. And so it turns out this is local, right? People take Shemitah very seriously, then you don't need to make a gzera. If people don't take Shemitah seriously, you need to make a gzera. And so it depends really on the local custom. How do we know that Rabbi Yehuda's neighborhood, they were very strict about Shemitah? There was once a person who said to his friend, oh, I was disparaging another person by calling them a convert, right? Dayar, which means a ger, right? Dayar means like a tourist. So they're not a real, quote unquote, real Jew, which is obviously wrong, but that's what he was saying. Dayar bar diarte. He's just a convert, the son of converts of a woman, meaning he's not so firm. People would say this today, unfortunately, too. Malay, so the
actually, that's the opposite usually, but okay.
It's true. No, so you're right. We did remember we said that before too. But the person was putting down his friend. He was insulting him, saying, oh, you're just a convert. You don't really, you're not really religious Jewish. Malay said, well, I don't eat pears on Shemitah like you, right? So his response basically showed, this is how we understand it, that one of the very fundamental mitzvot that they cared about in that neighborhood was Shemitah. And so like the biggest insult.
Where did he live, Rabbi Yehuda?
He lived in Eretz Yisrael. I mean, he was still in the
south. Okay.
I'm guessing up north, but I don't know exactly.
Okay.
They all lived up north, after the destruction. They were post Beit HaMikdash. But the point was, you could see, like when you say to someone, oh, you're a ger, which is a put down, right? A convert, but his put down back was, oh, well, at least I keep Shemitah, right? So you see clearly that it was like a really a transformational or fundamental mitzvah that they viewed. Okay, hi Hanan, good to see you. Tashma, we are around 10 lines from the top. We're going to bring several more proofs indicating this whole question about whether you make a takana for something b'shogeg atu mezid, meaning all of these are going to be cases, we'll see, where if you did something on purpose, we make a knas and we say, or we punish you and say you can't benefit from that thing. But what if you did the same exact prohibition by mistake, right? So again, Rabbi Meir's opinion was that if it's a doraita, we don't really worry about a mistake because people are careful about doraitas. It's midrabanan that if you make something wrong, if you go against an isur drabanan, we make a knas if you do it b'shogeg because we're afraid people are going to be very lax about isurei drabanan. So Tashma, we have a case. This is a very interesting case, which we've had before, which is a person who steals food from a Kohen that is truma, right? So the Torah says that if you take truma from a Kohen, you have to give back Kohen food to the Kohen, right? It says, quote a pasuk, Rashi quotes it here, Natan the Kohen et HaKodesh. You have to give back to the Kohen and it becomes Kodesh, right? You take truma from a Kohen, and you have to give back regular perot. Says the Braita, Achal truma tme'ah. Let's say a person eats truma that's tamei. Now, truma tamei has very little use for a Kohen because he can't eat it, right? He can burn it, but you can feed it to your animals. But maybe you can't feed it to your animals, but you can burn it, right? So you can get some money, but you can't get much. So mishalim chulin toharin, says the Braita, you pay back regular food that's tahar. You can't pay back tamei food, even though what you stole was tamei. Now, the Braita makes no sense. So let's read the words, but the Gemara is going to very quickly change it. Shilem chulin tmeim. Let's say you pay back chulin that's tamei. So that's what we think the case is, right? You stole truma from a Kohen that was tamei. So the Kohen couldn't really use it except to burn it. You paid back and said, oh, I'll give him back. I'm sorry I stole it. It was a mistake maybe, or it was on purpose, whatever. But I'm going to pay him back the apples that are tamei also. Why should his thing was tamei? Why should my thing be tamei? So Amar Sumchis, Misham Rabbi Meir, B'shogeg, look, if you pay him back by mistake, you didn't realize that your apples were tamei, then it counts. Tashlumav tashlumim. You paid him back exactly what you stole, or similar to what you stole. The mezid, but if you did it on purpose, then it doesn't count. Ain't tashlumav tashlumim. The chachamim omrim, no. Echad zeh tashlumav tashlumim. It counts. You paid him back, meaning he gets to keep it, but you have to pay him again. The chozer mishalim chulin toharim. You got to pay him again with apples that are tahar. Well, that's what the Braita says. The Gemara is going to now ask. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
He didn't make it tamei, did he?
No. It doesn't mean you made it tamei. It means you.
It was already tamei.
Did he know it was tamei when he stole it?
Oh, it's not clear, but it doesn't matter. He knew it was tamei after he stole it. Meaning he knew that what he stole was tamei, and he's paying back now either tamei or tahar. It depends. If you pay back b'shogeg, then again, that's the Tanakama. The words don't make a ton of sense. It says the Gemara Havinamba. We asked about this Braita. The mezid amai ain't tashlumav tashlumim. I don't get it. Let's say you steal truma that's tamei, and then you pay back chulin that's tamei. Why does that not count? You're doing the Kohen a big favor, right? Because the Kohen's truma was very low value. Because what can you do with truma that's tamei? You can't eat it ever, right? So even if the Kohen becomes tamei, he can't eat truma that's tameah. He has to burn it, right? But if you have chulin, let's say you're a Kohen and you never want to eat something that's tamei, right? You're makbid to eat b'tahara, right? So sure, you're not going to eat these apples. Let's just pick apples, right? These grapes, let's say, that are tamei. But if you become tamei as a Kohen, you can eat them all day long, right? A Kohen who's tamei can eat a food that's tamei, unless it's truma. So you actually benefited him because now he's got food that he can eat when he's tamei, and his truma he couldn't eat when he was tamei. So we asked about this. Why is it not effective to pay him back if you did it on purpose? He should thank you. You ate something from him which he could not eat when he was tamei. Because remember, a Kohen, even a tamei Kohen, can never eat truma that's tameah. Nobody can, right? You have to burn it. You're paying him back with something that's tahar. Something that's chulin, and therefore, even though it's tamei, he can eat it when he's tamei. So that was the question. Amar Rav, and Rav said, you're right. Amri la kidi, some said it was the name of kidi. There's words missing, or at least context at least, missing in this Braita, and this is what it should say. Okay, now let's read it from the beginning. Achal truma tme'ah, mishalim koldu. You know what? If you eat truma that's tamei from a Kohen, you can pay back anything, because anything you pay back is better than what you took. Right? Whether it's chulin tahar, chulin tamei, you can pay back anything to the Kohen. But what about achal truma tehora? Now comes and this is what the Braita should have said. Let's say you ate truma that's tahar. Now, truma that's tahar has value to the Kohen. He can eat it, right? But if you pay him back tamei, he can eat it when he's tamei, but he can't eat it when he's tahar, right? So it says the Braita, if you're achal truma tehora, mishalem chulin tehorin, you're supposed to pay back chulin that's tahar. Right. Now, remember, you can't discharge your responsibility by giving the Kohen truma, right? You owe the truma anyways. You can't say, oh, I owe you $10 in the grapes. Here's $10 of truma, right? But you have to pay back $10 of chulin tehorin. Now, let's say you go against the rule. Let's say you are shilem chulin tmein mahu. And that's the brightest question. instead of paying what you're supposed to pay, which is chulin tihorin, you paid back chulin tmein. So there, sumchas omer mishum Rabbi Meir, it depends. Bishogeg, if you paid back by mistake, meaning you gave back chulin tamei, but you didn't know it was tamei, then tashlumav tashlumim, and it counts. You didn't do the right thing, but you did it by mistake, and it's only isur drabanan not to give him something that's tamei, and therefore it counts. But mezid, if you do it on purpose, in tashlumav tashlumim, it doesn't count. Now, before we continue, this is what we're going to ask a question from in a second, because this is an isur drabanan. And Rabbi Meir is saying, if you do it on purpose, you have to pay again. If you do it by mistake, you don't have to pay again. And that goes against Rabbi Meir's principle, which is that when there's an Isser Drabanan, we have a Knas b'shogeg atu mezid, right? That whenever there's an Isser Drabanan, we want to take it very seriously, and we want to punish you if you do it by mistake, just like if you did it on purpose. But that's what the Breita seems to say, that according to Rabbi Meir, Sumchas in the name of Rabbi Meir, if you pay back chulin that's tamei, if it's by mistake, you don't pay, you don't have to pay again. And if it's on purpose, you have to pay again. So that's the first opinion. The Chachamim omrim, no, echad zeh ve'echad zeh, tashlumav tashlumim, meaning the Kohen gets to keep it. The choser mishal chulin torin, but we make you pay chulin torin. Okay? And Amar Rav Acha Breder Rav Ika, what said Rav Acha in the name of Rav Ika taught about this Breita, Hacha bekansi shogeg atu mezid Ika beinayo. The question here is whether you make a knas when you do something by mistake, when you would have made a similar knas when they did it b'mezid. Rabbi Meir seems to say there's no knas. So if you paid the Kohen truma at chulin tamei, you only have to repay him if you did it on purpose. But if you did it by mistake, you don't have to pay him a second time. And according to the Chachamim, you do. You have to pay him a second time. So this seems to contradict Rabbi Meir's opinion that if you do something bad, if you make ma'aser tamei, let's say, that you have to pay the person back b'shogeg atu b'mezid. Here he doesn't seem to agree with that.
But what do you mean did it by mistake?
He didn't realize that that it was tamei when he gave it to the Kohen. He didn't purposely give him chulin tamei. He didn't realize. And so, maybe he paid the Kohen, and then his daughter called him up and said, "Oh, sorry, Dad, I gave you the wrong grapes. Those are the tamei grapes."
Isn't it supposed to pay back the value, not the specific item?
Well, yes. So I'm just using, but he would pay back the value. So to answer your question, Hanan, it's a huge debate, to be honest with you. There's a machlok about whether you pay lefi midah or lefi mishkal, right? Do you pay back the value or do you pay back the identical item? But it doesn't matter for this debate. It could be either one, right? You could have stolen corn and paid back grapes. You know what I mean? It's just. So anyway, says the Gemara, 1 second. Just to have everyone have the place, we're 10 lines or 12 lines from the bottom there's a parentheses.
No, the only thing is if you pay back just the value in money, then money is money. It's not tamei or tahor. That's
correct. But they generally didn't. You didn't pay back money. And the Gemara talks about this elsewhere. Because remember, the pasuk says that you pay back and it becomes kodesh. So that whatever you pay back sort of gets the level of kedusha of what you took. So it has to be a food stuff. But again, it's a huge debate as to whether, like you said, lefi midah, lefi mishkal, how you pay back. But says the Gemara, hachi hashta. This is not really a question on Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir, remember the fundamental question of Rabbi Meir is: let's say I go over to someone's truma and I make it tamei, right? Which is a terrible thing to do because they can't eat it anymore. I damaged it. I didn't change it in any way. So we said earlier that if you do that b'mezid, you of course have to pay them back, right? But if you do it b'shogeg, you don't have to pay them back, in theory. Now, Rabbi Meir said that if it's a d'Rabbanan, meaning it's a isur d'Rabbanan, then we make a gzera of shogeg atu mezid. So now the question now is, why don't we say the same thing by paying back the Kohen? Answers the Gemara, hachi hashta. It's nothing similar about this case because hatam gavra l'shlumi kamechave. This person is trying to do the right thing, right? He's trying to pay back the Kohen. Anan nekam v'liknasei. You want us to get up and make a knas? Meaning he's not doing something wrong like damaging truma or causing. He's trying to pay back. He made an honest mistake, right? His honest mistake was that he paid back. Again, if it was not a mistake, it doesn't count. But as long as it was a mistake, why would Rabbi Meir say that we should make a knas? And therefore, Rabbi Meir holds that we don't make a punishment in shogeg atu mezid in this case. Tashma, come and learn another Breita from a very similar case. The Breita says, we'll see why it's similar. Dam shenitma v'zarku. Let's say you go to the Beit HaMikdash, you shecht your animal, the Kohen accepts the blood, and the blood becomes tamei. So you have a tamei cup of blood. Says the Braita, if you throw that blood on the Mizbeach, midoraita, it's tahar. It's not tahar, but the carbon counts, right? Because the tzitz is meratzeh. The tzitz makes clean all kinds of blood and all kinds of tumah. The Chachamim came and said, that's a bad idea. We don't want you to do it. So even though the Torah says it's okay to do it, we're not going to count it. Now, what does it mean they're not going to count it? Meaning you can't eat the carbon, right? We're not going to say throw it away because you can't go against the Torah. But midrabanan, it doesn't count. And you can't eat the carbon. Says the Braita, dam shenitzma. Now let's say the blood became tamei, and the Kohen anyways threw it on the Mizbeach, the Zarko. If it's b'shogeg, the Kohen didn't realize that it was tamei, or didn't realize that you're not allowed to do it b'tumah, then hortza. Then it counts, and the carbon is kosher, and the Yisrael can eat it. But b'mezid, lo hortza. But if you do it on purpose, it doesn't count. Now this is an Isser Drabanan, because midoraita you're allowed to throw the blood on the Mizbeach. Midrabanan you're not allowed to. And here, the Braita, which seems to be Rabbi Meir, because it's a Stam Braita, says that if you do it b'mezid, it doesn't count, but b'shogeg, it does count. Again, it seems to contradict Rabbi Meir's rule that we make a knas b'shogeg atu mezid. And the same answer, Amar lecha Rabbi Meir, hachi hashta. It's not very similar. Hatam gavra lechapuri kamechave. There, the purpose of what the Kohen is doing is to bring a kapara. It's not to cause damage. So, we're going to get up and make a knas. So it's the exact same answer, which is that we only make a knas when you're doing something that's damaging, not when you're trying to do something that's constructive. Tashma, another case, hamaaser b'shabbat. Okay, again, Isser Drabanan. So midoraita, you can take maaser whenever you want. Midrabanan, they prohibited you from taking maaser on Perot on Shabbat because it looks like you're preparing something. Tikkun mana. Right? Same reason we don't do many things on Shabbat. So midar banan, if you have fruit on Shabbat that's tevel, you're not allowed to separate maaser. Let's say you did it anyways. Says the Braita, ha-maaser b'Shabbat. You take off maaser on your beautiful, delicious grapes on Shabbat. Can you eat them? Says the Braita, b'shogeg, if you did it by mistake, yochal. You can eat the grapes. You did maaser, it counts. You can eat the rest of the grapes. B'mezid lo yochal. If you do it on purpose, you can't eat them. We make a knas. And again, it seems to be only b'mezid, not b'shogeg. And Gemara gives the same answer. Hachi hashna. Hatam gavra t'kunika mechave. Again, the person there is trying to fix and do the right thing. They made a mistake, but they're trying to do the right thing. And not a leikim v'liknasei. So again, it's the same answer. You might ask why we have to have so many cases of the same answer, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyways, we get to learn a lot of interesting cases. Tashma, another case, very similar. 5 lines from the bottom. Hamatvio kelim b'Shabbat. Same question about kelim, right? You're not allowed to use a kli that's not tovel. Midoraita, there's no reason you can't drop a kli into a mikvah on Shabbat, right? There's nothing malacha about that, but it's tikkun mana. You're basically preparing the final step in the thing. So says the Braita, you're not allowed to do it on Shabbat. What if you do it? Hamatvio kelim b'Shabbat, again, b'shogeg yishtamesh b'hem. B'mezid lo yishtamesh b'hem. If you do it by mistake, you can use them on Shabbat. But if you do it on purpose, you can't. Again, it seems to be a case where we don't make a knas of shogeg atu mezid. And we give the same answer for the 4th time. Hachi hashta hatam gavra l'tuhuri mani kamechavein. Person is trying just to make his things tahar, anan leikim v'liknasei. And therefore, Rabbi Meir would not hold of a knas in that case. Rabbi Meir's knas is only where you do something destructive, like making food tamei, or making something into kilayim, which we're going to see that case in a second. So that's where Rabbi Meir makes his knas. Now, says the Gemara on the bottom line.
So
that's
assuming that the shogeg is he didn't know he wasn't supposed to do that.
It could be either way. I mean, it could be he didn't know he was supposed to do it, or he didn't know it was Shabbos. He forgot, so it could be he forgot the day, he forgot the Isser. The Rami Rabbi Yehuda, Bidrabanan. We ask a question about Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yehuda. Remember, Rabbi Yehuda seems to say that by an Isser Drabanan, we don't make a knas of Shogeg Atu Meza. We only care about Doraita. But what about the following case, the Tanya? This is a complicated case, but this case is not so complicated, actually. The next one is complicated. This case is an interesting case. Remember that there is a halacha that if you drop, say, a piece of anything, to be honest with you, midoraita, chad betray is batal, right? You put one thing into 2, it's a minority, it becomes batal. You take one piece of, non-kosher meat, and you drop into 2 pieces of kosher meat. In theory, it's batal. Okay, now midoraita, obviously we talk about no tintam. Anyways, I don't want to really get into that. But let's talk about orla or maaser or truma, right? If you drop one thing into something else, it should be batel. The Chachamim made all kinds of takanot. The truma, you have to have 200. Maaser, you have to have 100, right? Things like that. Klayim are never batel. So let's say, now the halacha is that although things are batel barov, if you have something that's choshev, that's very distinguished or valuable or nikar, it's not batel. And one example that the Mishnah gives, they used to have fruits that were very, very prestigious. One of them is a gozei perach. A gozei perach are, what are egozim? What are egozim? Nuts. But what kind of nut is egoz? It's almond, right?
Almonds. Mhm.
Yeah. So they had these really, really fancy, beautiful almonds from a place called Perach. I'm assuming it's a place. There's other interpretations. Those are not batel. So if I dropped one almond of truma into 500 other almonds, you would say, whatever, you can eat it because you don't know which one it is. But if it's an egozei perach, it's not batel because it's very chashiv. But what if it gets crushed? An egozei perach that's crushed is not an egozei perach anymore. It's just a piece of an almond. So what happened was, naflu, this almond, this egozei perach, fell into other almonds, and it's nitpatsu. Then it got crushed. So it's no longer nikar. So it should be batel. Says the Braita, whether you dropped it by mistake or you dropped it on purpose, right? Oh, sorry, not that you dropped it. Whether you crushed it by mistake or you crushed it on purpose, it should not become batel, divrei Rabbi Meir, because an egozei perach is not batel, and the fact is that you crushed it doesn't take away the original status. Rabbi Yehuda, that's right, divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda. That's Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Now, this is an Isser Drabanan, because Midoraita, remember, everything is batel. And here Rabbi Yehuda seems to say that whether you did it by mistake or on purpose, it's not, which is he says elsewhere. And Rabbi Shimon Omrim, b'shogeg yalu b'mezid lo yalu. If you did it by mistake, it's batel. Yalu means it goes into the rest, so it doesn't count anymore. And if you did it b'mezid, it's not batel. Now, 4 lines from the top, Midoraita chad b'trei batel. Midoraita, everything is batel berov, right? 1 into 2, meaning 1 into a minority is batel. The Rabbanan who degazer. It's only the Rabbanan who say it's not okay. The Kakanis Rabbi Yehuda makes a knas b'shogeg atu mezid, which he usually says by Rabbanan you don't do. Answers the Gemara, no. Hatam hainu time of Rabbi Yehuda mishum da'ati the arume. Rabbi Yehuda is very worried that people are going to come and play games and are going to lie about this, because you can never understand why a person did this, right? Meaning, there's no way to tell whether it was done b'shogeg or b'mezid. And the person might, if you allowed him the regular principle that b'shogeg it's okay, but mezid it's not okay, we're worried that people are going to make it up and are going to be devious. And so here specifically, he makes a gzera. Ask the Gemara now, what about Rabbi Yossi? Rami Rabbi Yossi had Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi here seems to say, and he was quoted in the Braita, 3rd line of the page, that b'shogeg yalu b'mezid lo yalu. That if you do it by mistake, it's batel, and if you do it on purpose, it's not batel. But what about the following Mishnah in Masechet Orla? It's not. The Mishnah says, let's say you have an etiyah shel Orla or shel kloya kerem shenit'arvu b'netiyot acherot. Right? You have a stalk, right, an etiyah, and it's Orla, which means you can't eat it, and it's not batel, right? And you by mistake mix it up, you take it and you plant it in your vineyard among 50 other stalks. And you obviously think, I'm going to remember which one it was, and I won't eat it. I'll eat the grapes from the other ones, right? And then you come out 2 days later, you can't for the life of you remember which one was your Orla, right? It happens all the time. I mean, it doesn't happen to us because we don't plant. But, you put something down, you're like, I remember which one fell on the floor, right? I won't eat it. You come back, and of course, you'd have no recollection. So the problem is what happens, right? So says the Mishnah, Nitiyah shel Orla, or klei karim, the same thing if it was klayim, shenit'arvu b'netiyot acherot, hareza lo yilaket. You shouldn't pick the fruit from all of those branches, because you have no idea which one came from Orla or which one came from Kilayim. The im yiliket, and if you do pick it, ya'alu be'echad matayim. As long as the amount of Orla or the amount of Kilayim was less than 1 in 200, it will be batel. Meaning if there's 500 grapes there and 2 of them came from this one vine, and you picked some grapes, you don't know which one came from where. It's batel because it's less than batel in 200. Ubilvad shelo yitkaven l'laket. As long as you don't do it on purpose, meaning you don't plant it with intention of saying, look, I have this Orla plant, I can't eat it, But if I put it in my kerem and it then becomes batel and 200, I'll be able to eat it. So if you do it on purpose, you can't eat it. And Rabbi Yossi says, af hamitkaven laket. Even if you do it with that in mind, it's still batel. Yalu be'echadu matayim. It's batel on 1 in 200. So here Rabbi Yossi seems to say that even if you do it b'mezid, we don't make a knas as long as it's 1 in 200. It says Gemara, that's not. There's an explanation for that because ha'itmar Allah, we taught about that. Amar Rava chazaka in adam oseret karmo b'netiyah achat. In fact, we don't really think that a person intended to do this, meaning it's not that he didn't intend to do it. It's very uncommon, right? Because what's the benefit? Who in the world would take their right mind and say, look, I'm going to take my arla, I'm going to put it in my kerem so that's 1 in 200 and it becomes batel. What if it's not 1 in 200? Then the entire kerem becomes asur, right? It's a pretty idiotic thing to do because you could prohibit 200 times as much. So therefore, since it's so uncommon, we don't make a gzera. Even if you're the one fool who does it, even b'mezid, Rabbi Yossi seems to say, we don't make a gzera in that case because it's so unusual, right? The general principle is, ein adam oseret karmo b'netiyah achat. A person won't plant one thing that potentially can get rid of destroy his whole kerem, and therefore, because it's so unusual, we don't make a gzera in this case, even if it ended up happening, because it's not shchia, it's not common. Okay. Continues the Mishnah. Kohanim shepalgu b'mikdash b'mezidim chayavim. Okay. Let's say a kohen is supposed to do their avodah in the Beit HaMikdash. They really don't like the guy who brought the carbon ola that day, and they say, you know what? I'm going to have a thought when I bring this on the Mizbeach that he's going to eat it, or I guess the Ola, that we're going to burn the stuff on next Wednesday, which is called pigel, right? That's chutz the zmano, that's pigel. And then he goes back to the guy and he says, listen, I hate to tell you, everything went really well, except by mistake, I thought of the wrong day, and I'm sorry your carbon doesn't count. Says the Mishnah, if you do it on purpose, how we know you do it on purpose is not clear, then you have to pay the guy back because you caused damage. It's hezek she'eino nikar, you can't see it. But you cause damage on purpose, you have to pay. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. HaKohanim shepaglu b'mikdash mezidin chayavim. Now, Tanu Rabbanan says the Braita. Let's expand on this. Haya osa imo b'taharot. Right. Let's say you call up your friend and you say, "Listen, Jeff. Right, I need help stomping on my grapes tomorrow, and everybody I know is tamei, but these grapes are truma, let's say, or whatever. I need them to be tahar. Right, I'm selling them to the Beit HaMikdash. So I need you. Are you tahar? Yeah, I'm tahar. Can you come and help me out? So you go and help out your friend. And at the end, you're like, I didn't have the heart to tell you, but I'm really tamei. Right? So you really didn't help him very much. So Yehaya Osa Imo b'taharot, right? V'omerlo, and you tell him the next day, by mistake, I just realized, taharot shasiti imcha nitmei tehaya. Nitmeu hayu. Right? Nitmeu, sorry. They became tamei. So you tell him after the fact. Or let's say, says the Braita, same thing. The Kohen is doing the carbon for someone else. After the fact, you say, well, it's not clear if it's after the fact, but Amarla, you say to him, by the way, I had the wrong machshava. I thought about the wrong day when we were, the wrong zman, let's say, right? When we were doing those carbonot. Says the Braita, ne'eman. You're believed. Now, we think right now it's because you're still in the act of doing it. However, aval amarlo, if you say, Taharot shasiti imcha b'yom ploni, by the way, last Tuesday I helped you, I was tamei. Or zvachim shasiti imcha b'yom ploni, last week I did your ola for you, nitpalgu, eino ne'eman. Then you're not believed. If it's after the fact, you're not believed. Now, ask the Gemara, ma'ishna reisha, ma'ishna seifa. Why? What's the difference between the first case and the second case? Amar Abaya, because kol shebiyado ne'eman. If you are still able to do it, meaning you're still in the act of the karban or the act of stomping on these grapes, and so in theory you can actually right now become pigel. So therefore, if you say, I did it b'pigel 15 minutes ago, or I was tamei 20 minutes ago, then you're believed because you have the ability to do it, and therefore you're ne'eman. Okay. However, Rava says, "Kigon de'ashkechei v'amar lev lo midi." It's talking about a case where you found the person. He didn't say to you, by the way, I did it wrong. You mean you had an opportunity to tell him, but he didn't tell him that it was tamei or that it was pigel. After that, he found him and he said it. So the question is, says Rava, we don't believe that you would have not told him if you had been true initially. The fact that you didn't report it right away makes us think that you weren't doing it betuma, you weren't making a pigel, you got angry at the person afterwards, or whatever reason. You told him, I don't know why, but you changed your mind afterwards, and we don't trust that at the time that you did it, you were pigul or you were tameh. And that's the halacha. Tosfos raises the very, very, very complicated question, which is that, of course, much of our Jewish lives rely on the principle of eid echad ne'aman b'isurim, right? We trust people. And so why in the world wouldn't you trust this person here? I mean, the person walks in and says, I did your thing b'tumah, right? Why in the world wouldn't we listen to that person? So Tosfos gets into it. It's not so simple. Tosfos says it has to be where there's a little bit of a debate about what's going on, and that either initially there's a dispute about what's happening, or the person initially said, I did it right, and then he changes his mind, right? So the question might be where there's a lot more to it than just the person showing up and saying, I did it b'tumah, right? So anyways, it gets into a complicated question about whether a person can be trusted and what cases they can be trusted, okay? But that's the machloket Rava and Abaya. Now says the Gemara, let's have a case. Hu da amar le lechavre. There was a case. We are again trying to say where it is, around halfway, exactly halfway down the daf, in the middle. Hu da amar le lechavre. The person came over to his friend and said to him, sorry to tell you, taharot shasiti imcha biyom ploni nitzmeu. Last Tuesday I came to your house and helped you prepare all your preserves for the rest of the year. I was tameh the whole time. So sorry, maybe you should put a tumah on the jars. So now this seems to be a case where you wouldn't believe him, according to what we just said, right? Because it's after the fact. So Ata the Kamei de Rabbi Ami, he came in front of Rabbi Ami and he said, Amarle Shurat Hadin Eino Ne'aman. According to the legal halacha, which is what we just quoted from the Braita, the person is not trusted. You can assume it's all tahar. He's lying to you. Amar lefanav Rabbi Asi, Rabbi Asi, they said this in front of Rabbi Asi, and he said, Rabbi, Ato Merkain, is it true? Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Yossi, Ma'aseh Shatorah Haminto. What can I do in this case? The Torah believes a person to report even if the evidence seems to suggest otherwise. Now, says what does that mean? The Torah believes a person. Hechan haminato. Where did the Torah say that you believe a person? Amr Yitzchak Bar Bisna. What about Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur? What about a Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur? Think about a Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, right? A Kohen Gadol, let's say, again, this is getting very complex, but let's say you would not believe a person to come and report and say, I did something wrong, right? How would you ever know that something is pigul? Right? Remember, pigul is b'machshava. So how would you ever know? It must be that you would only know if a Kohen said out loud, oh, by the way, I'm doing this with the intention of having pigul. And someone standing next to him heard it in real time and reported it. That's where you would trust it. Of course, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur has no one around him, right? So, because the Kohen Gadol does the avodah by himself. It says, Chol Adam lo yiyah, right? Well, so it says, Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur yochiach, d'chi amar pigul mehemet. Kohen Gadol walked out of the Beit HaMikdash on Yom Kippur and said, by the way, I did the karban wrong, so you're all screwed, right? Then he would be believed. How would he be believed? And so how would anyone know if he's telling the truth? How would we know? No one can be there. It must be because a Kohen, anyone is believed if they say I did something wrong. Somewhere, well, that's ridiculous. Maybe not. Maybe they heard him. He was screaming. He was in the Beit HaMikdash. No one was there. They heard him saying, I am now doing this karban so that we can eat it in 3 days, right? He said it out loud. It says, he loved the mehemen. Dilma de Shamina de Pagel. Says, well, it doesn't help. Because even if you hear him saying it, maybe he's not actually telling the truth. Maybe he's doing the karban for the right purpose, but he's lying about why maybe he's not telling it at the right time. He loved the mehemen. If you didn't trust the Kohen or any individual, you wouldn't trust him, even if you heard him. Because Dilma Batar Hachikamar. Maybe he did the karban correctly, and then he gets up and he says, again, fooling everyone, by the way, I'm doing it wrong now. Well, why he would do this, no one knows, but maybe that's what he did. Well, Dilma the Chazini bepishpesh. You think no one saw him? They would peek in through the cracks, right? There were plenty of people watching the Kohen Gadol, even when someone's in their private bedroom and, closest place, there's always people looking. So kasha. Anyways, it's not clear how we answered this question and how we resolve that issue. Now, continues the Gemara with 3 lines from the last narrow line. Bahuda ata the kamedr of Ami. We're going to make this a lot more real now. They came in front of Ami and they said the following question. Amar le, person said to Rabbi Ami, I feel really bad. I'm a sofer. Someone asked me to write a Sefer Torah, and I really hate this guy. So I wrote it incorrectly. Now I feel bad. I don't know what to do. So Sefer Torah shekatafti leploni, askarot shelo lo kataftim lishman. I said, I'll get him, right? I'll write the Sefer Torah, but I'm going to write it without the right intention. Remember, every time you write the name of Hashem in the Sefer Torah, you have to do l'shem Hashem. Can't be a mistake. Can't just be stopped. I didn't write it properly. So if you look at my Torah, it looks perfect, right? But I did it shelo lishman. So Amar Le, so Rabbi Ami said to him, you know what? Who owns the Sefer Torah? Where's the Torah right now? Because remember, Abaya said that if you still can do the thing, you're believed. But if you can't still do it, you're not believed. So Sefer Torah biyad mi. Who has the Sefer Torah? Okay, I already gave it to him, right? I already gave it to the guy who bought it from me. Amar Le said, well, then you're believed that you don't get paid, right? Because you said you did it wrong. So he hired you to write a Sefer Torah and you didn't write a Sefer Torah. So you don't get paid. Sefer Torah, but you're not trusted to pass on the Sefer Torah. So it's a kosher Sefer Torah, and you won't get paid for writing it. So you screwed yourself, but you didn't mess up the Sefer Torah. Amar le Rabbi Yirmiyah said, 1 second. I get you won't pay him for writing all the names of Hashem, but schar Sefer Torah, kule mihivsid, he wrote the rest of the Torah, which is kosher, meaning we're about to see in a second, you can just write over the Shemot of Hashem. So you can just write them a second time, b'shem Hashem, l'shma, and so the rest, 90% or 95% was written. So you should pay him 95% of his schar. Amar le, no, I disagree. Shekol sefer Torah she'ein askarot shelo ketuvot l'shma eino shaveh klum. If you didn't write a Sefer Torah completely with the names of Hashem written l'shma, it's as if you wrote nothing. Ask him why. Can't you just put over a pen and make them kadosh, meaning you can trace l'shem Hashem in every instance and do it l'shem Hashem, the right purpose, and make it kosher? Says where Kiman, who does he hold like? Name of the Rabbi Yehuda. It seems like he's not going like Rabbi Yehuda, who says you're allowed to do that. Ditznan, as we learned in the Mishnah, it's a Braita, the Tanya. Let's say you're up to a point in the Sefer Torah, you're writing the Shem of Hashem, and you are very confused so far, and you make a mistake, and you think I'm supposed to write Yomer Yehuda El Moshe. So Yomer Hashem El Moshe, you think it should say Yehuda. Now Yehuda looks very much like Hashem, just has a dollar, right? So your intention is to write the name Yehuda, not to write the name Hashem. So that's Lo Lishma, right? But you are a very confused so far, and you forget the Dalet. So you end up writing Yehuda without a Dalet, which is the Shem Hashem. So you wrote the right thing with all the wrong intentions. Right? Says the Braita, you're supposed to write the name of Hashem in the Torah. But you mistakenly thought you're supposed to write Yehuda, but you made a mistake in your mistake. Right? So now you wrote the Shem Hashem. Says the Braita, that doesn't count because you didn't write it l'shem of Hashem. So ma'avir alav kumis mikachot Rabbi Yehuda. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you have to actually trace it over. You have to rewrite the name of Hashem. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says you're allowed to do that. So the Chachamim said you can't, right? So it seems that if you're not paying this guy for the Sefer Torah, it's because you don't hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Because according to Rabbi Yehuda, sure, he did all the names of Hashem wrong. But why can't you hire another sofer who you trust and say, retrace the name of Hashem every time it appears in the Torah? Let's say, 5% of the Torah, which is less. But let's say 5% of the Torah is Shemot Hashem. You'll pay the guy 5% of writing a Sefer Torah, and it should be kosher. So why don't you pay this guy 95%? Says, no. Even Rabbi Yehuda, who says you can rewrite the name of Hashem, agrees that you can do it once in a while. You can't do it every single time it shows up in the Torah. Why not? Because if you did that, obviously they would look distinct, right? They'd look heaped up. They'd look bolded. And if you have a Torah where the name of Hashem looks bold every time, that's a pretty weird looking Sefer Torah, and it would be puzzle because it looks inappropriate. Afilo Tema says Rabbi Yehuda, Adkan Lukam Rabbi Yehuda ala b'chada askar. If it's once in a while or one, Avol dekule Sefer Torah lo. You couldn't make the whole Sefer Torah look like that. Mishum demixi kiminumar. it looks spotted, right? It looks bolded like a namer, right? Like a leopard. And so therefore you're not allowed to write a Sefer Torah in that way. And therefore the guy got no payment, but the Sefer Torah was kosher because we don't trust him to apostle it. We only trust him to lose his payment. One more final case. Sorry, before we finish. Rabbi Avo, similar story. A person came in front of Rabbi Avo. Amalei said to him, Sefer Torah shekatafti leploni, gvilin shelo lo ibadatem lishman. You know, the gvil, which is the parchment of the Torah, has to be made, has to be worked, l'shem Sefer Torah. And I didn't do it. I just bought them on eBay, right? And I didn't do it properly. But you can't tell that from looking at the Torah, of course. So Amalei said to him, well, Sefer Torah biyad mi. Well, who has the Sefer Torah? Amalei biyad lokeach, the guy who bought it from me. Amalei, well, mitoch shata ne'eman lafsid scharcha, since you are trusted to lose your payout, which is thousands of dollars, you're also trusted ne'eman lafsid Sefer Torah. You're also trusted to apostle the Sefer Torah. Now, that seems to be different than what we just said. So asking one on the top of Nun Hey Amud Aleph, Umayshna mid Rebbe Ami. Why is it different than Rebbe Ami? Because Hatam, you might think we would trust the guy to say, we think the guy might be lying that he apostled it because he thinks I'll still get paid. I'll get paid 95%, right? I'll screw up this guy's whole Sefer Torah and I'll get paid 95%. Hatam Ikelamemra Ta'ibid Rebbe Yirmiyah. He made a mistake in Rebbe Yirmiyah because he thought that, like Rebbe Yehuda said, you can rewrite the Shemot Hashem. So I'll get paid for what I did. But here, if the actual text, if the actual cloth is puzzle, then nothing about the Torah is kosher. And hacha kivan to mafsid kule agre, he's losing all of his value. We should atav amar emar kushta ka'amar. Therefore, we assume that he's telling the truth. And there's a migu that since he puzzled himself from getting any payment, he also puzzles the Sefer Torah. And so in this case, we actually do trust him. While in the earlier case, we don't necessarily trust him to apostle the Sefer Torah. And we will stop here at the Mishnah. And I think, Miriam, you're picking up tomorrow?
I am.
Okay. This week is a very exciting week of Daf Yomi. If you like Agarata, it's almost all the Agarata in the whole Masechta. They're super long Dapim, and they are very relevant to the 3 weeks and the 9 days. It's all the stories of the destruction of Yerushalayim, including Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. So be prepared. It's a good week, fun week. Okay, everyone. Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Ellie.